What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video. This is the second part of the Book of Enoch series. I've been meaning to make it for a while, just haven't got around to it. And it is on the subject of women and what Enoch has to say about women, but also what some other books that have been taken out of the Bible have to say. Before I begin, I want to make clear that this is not an attack on women or some sort of, misogynist promotion or anything like that. It is for the edification of women, but men as well, because men also have a role to play in the edification of the younger generations, both male and female. Now, the subtitle is called No Substance, and the reason I called it that because I just came across a movie that starred Demi Moore, which was called Substance. I came across it by accident. I watched it, and it's essentially about a woman who starts losing her beauty, and the makeup can't hide it anymore, and she resorts to this alien substance which has a side effect and eventually turns her into a monster, which is a great analogy as to the subject of this video. Now, the base subject, I should say, of this video has to do with makeup and a woman's adornment, but it also has to do with where it all leads to and the root of it. The Book of Enoch explains that when the fallen angels, or the watchers, or Satan and his angels, came down to the earth lusting after the daughters of men, the first thing they taught them was witchcraft. Mainly enchantments, but one of the forms of witchcraft was putting paint on their faces. This is how Enoch describes it: paint on their faces. And when you keep reading, he describes the entire purpose of it. It was all done, it was all taught to them for the purpose of deceiving men. Now, another book I've come across is the 12 Patriarchs, or the testimony of the 12 Patriarchs of Israel. These 12 Patriarchs, as you know, were the children of Jacob, 11 of which sold their brother Joseph into slavery. Now, in these books, all of them are on their deathbeds, and they gather their children around their deathbeds, and they start telling them or confessing the wrongs they've done in their life. Other than Joseph. Joseph was blameless throughout his life, but he still gives wisdom unto his children. Okay, all of them do, either through mistakes or through knowledge they received from the angels. I'm going to stick to about 4 books, because all of them stress on the subject of fornication. Now, going back to Enoch, keep in mind that when they taught the women, or the daughters of men, these things, when the angels taught them that, the fallen angels, putting paint on their faces and all sorts of witchcraft, they were intending for them to deceive men, but then they themselves were eventually deceived as well, because they then started lusting after these women and fornicating with them through all manners of abominations. I'm talking orgies, sodomy, all sorts of oral sex, that sort of thing. And it is because of these actions that the angels, these fallen angels who disrobed themselves, were bound in hell. Keep that in mind, because at the end of this video, it's all going to make sense here as to where this is going. Now, Enoch says that through these unions between these angels and the daughters of men were born giants. Okay, now I know everybody's going to be, oh, wow, that's amazing, and there's a lot of fascination about these giants, but that's not the important part. What's amazing is what he says afterwards. He says when these giants became, fully grown or adults, they caused bloodshed and all manners of evil on the earth. And the reason was because evil spirits proceeded from them. So keep that in mind. So Enoch is suggesting that children produced out of unholy unions or wicked beds, only evil can come forth from them. But now we get into the books of the patriarchs. And Reuben, by far, is the most extreme. Reuben claims that women by nature are evil. Now that's pretty extreme to say that, but he gives his explanation for it. Now mind you, I'm also making this video because I've come across a lot of YouTube videos with frustrated young men, especially in the West, and they've just given up on women. And what this is going to do is going to teach them how to handle women and how to go about looking for the correct one. Because what you've been taught through the media is leading you down a dark path and leading you to whores, essentially. Now hear what Reuben says. Reuben says, women are evil. Not me. Well, Reuben said it, okay? Just don't attack me, women, because I know they're going to get pissed off about this. And he says, this is because they have no physical strength over men. So immediately we understand it stems out of envy. Envy is just part of their nature. Now, because they have no power over men, they resort to deceiving them through, listen to what he says, the adornment of a harlot. Amazing. So the adornment of a harlot, a harlot is the old word for whore. Adornment is, the makeup, the earrings, mini skirts, high heels to change the form of their legs or whatever. It's for deception. And he says, if they can't deceive the man in that manner, they then resort to witchcraft. In other words, they resort to the assistance of Satan himself. And this is all from envy, you guys. All of it. He further goes on to say that any woman who adorns themselves with this paint on their face, this makeup, is reserved for the fire. Now that is, by our standards today, extreme to say such a thing. But hear me out, because it's all going to make sense as to where this is leading to and the state of the world today. It is all connected, is what I'm trying to say. Other books, such as Judah and Levi, they also warn on the sin of fornication. They're not as extreme as Reuben, but somewhere in the testimony of the patriarchs, there is also a passage that claims that women are actually more in danger than men with regards to this deception, makeup, the adornment of a harlot. And this is confirmed when you look at the Book of Enoch as well. The Book of Enoch, when he's going through hell, describing it, the angel showing him hell, he describes the sound of it as the sirens of women. In other words, he's suggesting there's a ton of them down there. And hear what Reuben says. Reuben says that women are more susceptible to fornication than men. So they actually have more of a desire to fornicate, sex outside marriage, multiple partners, adultery, than men do. And, you know, most of us go through life thinking they're not like that, but they're just good at hiding it, and they support each other. They'll lie for each other, cover for each other. I mean, it just comes instinctively. More than likely, your girlfriend or your wife, I'm not saying all of them, has a higher body count in terms of sexual partners than you do. This is what the prophets say, you guys. It's amazing. They're very smart at keeping their secrets, these women. I mean, they have no problem destroying other people with their tongues, but when it comes to their own secrets, oh, they're very good at keeping it in the dark. They'll go straight to the grave with it. No doubt. I've seen it myself. 80, 90 years old, no problem. Now, hear what else Reuben says. This is very powerful. In terms of the adornment of a harlot. Once a woman puts these things on, she looks at herself in the mirror, or today's in the camera or Instagram, and the poison is instilled in their eyes. That is a powerful word, instilled. It's suggesting that it goes right into the bloodstream. Very difficult to get out. Almost impossible. And then, he says, they are led by that spirit. Did you hear what he said? they are led by that spirit, deceiving not only themselves, but anyone else that associates with them. He goes on to say that once they can get men to fornicate with them, amazing, they then control the mind of that man. This is where they get their feeling of power from. They control the minds of kings. And I already told you in my last video, Rome's role in the crucifixion, how the hidden hand behind the crucifixion of Christ was the wife of Pontius Pilate, by her own words. Once she sees him resurrected, realizes she's doomed, and her whole band, she says, we devised the evils against him. And why do they do this? They do this out of envy. Nothing else. It's not like they're going to get the position. They just do it to say, hey, I did that. Because they're led by that spirit that makes them feel empowered. Keep that in mind, because I'm going to get into feminism and this whole women's liberation and all that. These men and kings, even kings, don't even know that they're under the control of the woman. That's the wickedest part about it. They don't even know that their motherboard is under the total control of the women that they are fornicating with. An adulterous woman has blood on her hands. All these murders you see, all this bloodshed, all these wars in the world, a lot of it, you guys, stems from this. I'll get into that and where this is all going. Now, when you get into what Judah and Levi have to say, now mind you, Judah and Levi, they were given the gift of the priesthood and the monarchy. And in fact, it is Levi who is above Judah. Because the priesthood in those days, and it should be in these days, rules above the monarchy. Those days are coming back, whether you like it or not. Now, they're not as extreme as Reuben, but they still warn on the sin of fornication. And I'm going to have to get into other things they said, because they start getting into the 7 natures of men. I'm going to have to make another video on it, and women, and how everything is connected. We have 7 spirits within us. And they can be used for both good or evil, light or dark. But hear what they say about the 3 main vices to the souls of men, or the traps to the souls of men. One is the love of money. And again, I'm not saying don't go out there and don't get money or whatever, but don't fall in love with it. 2, fornication. And 3, alcohol. But hear what they call alcohol. They call it the counsel of fornication. And once you add in that makeup, that miniskirt, high heels, that perfume, it's a done deal. Game, set, match. The most interesting of these books besides Reuben. Reuben was highly interesting, but it was extreme. Is the book of Joseph. Now, as you know, Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers. But by the grace of God, a rich man in Egypt took him in. Unfortunately, there was another test awaiting him, which was of course a woman. She was the wife of this rich man. And she tried on multiple occasions to get Joseph to sleep with her, to commit adultery with her. Now Joseph, being a man that feared God and kept the commandments given Moses, refused. But she was just so envious of him and his innocence. And she also knew, I'm going to argue, that where he was going, because he eventually became a ruler in Egypt. Through her witchcraft, Satan was probably whispering in her ear, this guy's going places, stop him. So she wanted to mess things up. So Joseph stands firm and says, no, I'm not sleeping with you. And he starts to teach her the ways of God. And then once she gets him to open up, she starts cooking dinner for him. She said, I want to make dinner for you. And while she's making this dinner, she does enchantments on his food. And for those of you who think that this kind of witchcraft doesn't exist, I bear witness to it. I'll just tell you a short story. When I took my dad's body back to Africa to be buried with his fathers, this older woman said, hey, why don't you stay with me? Let me cook for you. It's, you're going through hard times, blah, blah, blah. I said, okay, thank you, great. And one day, I walked out of the house. I was going somewhere, but I forgot something, so I walked back in. And to her surprise, I caught her with a pot where she was preparing the food under her, with her hand over it and her eyes rolled in the back of her head, doing like something like this. I mean, she was whispering something. And the first thing I thought was, she's nuts. But in my search for knowledge and these books, I understood that this is an ancient practice. And even my mother always warns me, be careful what you eat at a woman's house. Be careful. Because they're into evil. I mean, they're into all types of evil, you guys. I don't even want to mention this other story. Like, it's so sick that I don't even want to mention it. But it has to do with menstrual fluids, which they use also for their magic. I mean, wicked as hell. Reckless. Anyhow, I didn't want to gross you out with that. Joseph then tells her, look, I know you did enchantments on this food, but just so you know you have no power over me, I'm going to eat it anyway right before your eyes. And when she sees that, she's infuriated because this always works for her. But she's now come across a man that loves the Lord his God with all his heart and with all his soul. And what does Reuben tell us whosoever refrains from fornication, Belial has no power over him. Now, Belial is the ancient name of Satan. At that time, that's what he was called. So now she's infuriated, and what does she do? She resorts to false witnessing, which they still do to this day. So what does she do? She tells her husband, Joseph tried to rape me. So of course her husband believes her, and he has Joseph thrown in prison. And while he's in prison, can you guess who comes to visit him? It's this crazy bitch again. You see? They control kings. Not real kings, by the way. Not God's elects. But these bozos running the planet. Now, to make a long story short, you can read it yourself. But he's eventually delivered out of there as well. And goes on to become a major ruler in Egypt. And by the way, this is before Moses. So they already knew this was a sin back then. Okay? They weren't given the commandments or anything like that. The laws from Moses yet. Because Joseph was buried and he demanded, because he knew Moses was coming. The birth of Moses was coming. And he was commanded, when we go into our land, take my body with you. Okay? So the Israelites, on their way out of Egypt, they took Joseph's body and brought it back to Israel with them. Now, they also teach us, these patriarchs, how to combat this deception. Because after I read these books, you guys, my mind was so overwhelmed. The first thing I thought to myself was, you know, being someone who was born and raised in the West, who then can be saved? Because we're taught this is completely normal from literally when we're kids. Before our sexual organs even start, you know, functioning. And just think of the sexual images you're fed on a daily basis. On regular television. Never mind pornography. That's just like so extreme. In terms of the traps for our souls. That we have no idea just how deep. I'm talking about the West and probably the East as well, but the West is spreading this all over the place now with their internet, with their technologies. We have no clue just how deep or how bad the traps that are laid are. We have to have the entire armor of Jesus Christ, like everything, every single day. Because the traps are round about you, and the worst part about it is you don't even know it. You have no clue. Think about the TV shows you watch. I'll give you another story here. I went to Africa, to a poor country, Eritrea to be exact. For anyone who knows where that is, it's former Ethiopia in the north. And I remember buying some food at the local market, and there was these two girls. They were like 16, 17. They were giggling, and you know, they were the cashiers. They were giggling about their boyfriend and blah, 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 you know. And one of them imitated how her boyfriend tried to kiss her. And she stuck out her tongue like this. And both the little girls were in total shock, and they were just, oh my goodness, what an animal. Because they're so innocent that they can't even conceive in their mind that you should kiss another human being like that. And then I compared it as to what I was thinking when I was like 8 years old, watching TV, walking down the street and seeing people make out. And I was like, they were ingraining us with that kind of thinking since we were little babies. And it's only then I realized just how much we're under attack. And I also came to realize that naturally we wouldn't even be able to conceive these types of acts, including so-called French kissing. That's what they used to call it back in the day. Tongue kissing. French kiss. You know, I remember the girls in our class even, like, you know, grade 4 or 5. Oh, it's a French kiss. You know, it's something that they watched on, you know, Saved by the Bell or Baywatch or Melrose Place, or, you know, those shows, Beverly Hills 90210. I mean, we were watching that back in the day. And you come to realize, once you travel to these places, because the place I was at had no internet access. It did for, you know, the rich folks, which this kid was probably a rich kid, or, you know, the son of some general. And he had access, and he was learning these things, and then he tried to take it to the locals. Freak. Perverting the whole entire planet. It's not funny, I shouldn't laugh. But I just thought to myself, like, we're not able to conceive these things. These things are taught to us. Okay? So we are under attack. And then when I read these books, I said to myself, who then can be saved? Because in grade 9, we were already being taught, like, the man who sleeps with the most women is the biggest man. He's the coolest guy. When in fact, in reality, he's going to be the one most in danger of losing his soul. It goes for women as well. You see? And the patriarchs teach us how to combat this, which will also assist all these frustrated young men on how to go about searching for the correct woman. Number one, your entire purpose should be to preserve your innocence, to fight for it. They also say that when you see a woman with this paint on her face, don't give her any attention. Okay? Do not even look at them. And this, I think, is because, you know, women are naturally envious of each other. So if we as men start giving the women who fear God, who don't wear this makeup on their face, all the attention and all the praise, all the other women will follow suit. Okay? Because naturally, they'll follow men, you guys. That's what you have to understand. We've been totally brainwashed to think that men should follow women, when it's actually the other way around in nature. Okay? Like, we should be the cherished ones. We should be the ones that, you know, that's nature, you guys. But they've got you thinking in a totally upside down kind of way, in this upside down world, where the servants are the rulers and the real rulers are servants. This is what's going on. Number 2, do not get involved in their chit-chat. in their affairs, the patriarchs say. Their slander or their gossip or whatever. Don't even reiterate it. And number 3, do not ever be alone with another man's wife. Okay? Even if it's just innocent, hey, we're going for coffee, he's my friend, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Don't even give into it. Unless, she's dying and, my husband's at work, I'm dying, or my kid, my kids fell off a bike or whatever. Can you help me? Okay. But I'm just saying, just casually, no. Because it gives room for that seed to be planted in your mind. And that is one of the vices which destroys your soul. Adultery is a major one. Now, what does Jesus Christ say? Because we look at the state of this world. The wars, the violence, everything. And when you read these books, you come to realize that a lot of this is caused by this whole woman's liberation. Because they're running around unchecked in their adultery. I can screw who I want, when I want, where I want. It's my body, my choice. And what that is causing is the love of the world to wax cold. Jesus Christ says it. Because sin is abound, the love of the world shall wax cold. And that's when you're going to start seeing all these wars, all this violence, and then they can't figure it out. They say, oh, Jesus. So, wisdom says an adulterous woman has blood on her hands. And that's why wisdom says that. Because this is where it all leads to. This sexual freedom and sexual revolution, or whatever you want to call it. And that's what this so-called women's liberation brought about. I'm not saying, women shouldn't drive or they shouldn't do this or that. Okay? But it's gone to the extreme now. And the nations who have allowed this, it is by design. Although these nations claim to be Christian, make no mistake about it, you guys. If they allow this type of behavior freely and call it freedom, think about that. It's a trap for your soul, which is meant for your bondage, and they bring it in the name of freedom. You see the irony? Do you see the genius in it? I'm going to have to make another book series on the books of Adam and Eve, which have also been kept out of the scriptures by the churches. And this is after they're kicked out of the garden, and how Eve is just constantly crying. Constantly. Adam tries to commit suicide. He's constantly telling her, like, woman, look what you've caused. Look at this. Because it was her folly. She deceived Adam because the serpent deceived her. You can be equal to men, to God himself. Some of these feminists, they go on and say, God is a woman. Some of them say that. It's absurd. They have no clue what's going on. And now they're trying to spread these ideologies throughout the world. You've just had Saudi Arabia. They were awarded the World Cup in 2034. It's coming up. And that's because they're making reforms. You see? You see what they do? If you do this, we'll give you this. Speaking of reforms, as you all know, about a month ago, the Assad regime was overthrown in Syria. And this new leader takes power, and he happens to be a Muslim, devout. I mean, so they say. Anyhow, the BBC sent a journalist to interview him. The same journalist, mind you, who interviewed Gaddafi a week before they murdered him. Oh, man. I mean, these people and their arrogance and their outright nerve. It's unbelievable. Can you guess, after 10 years of civil war, what were the first two questions this BBC journalist asked this new leader in Syria? Number one, are you going to give women their rights? That's all he could think about. Not schools, not hospitals, not roads, agricultural infrastructure, you know, things that matter. Survival. No, it was women's rights. And the second question was, are you going to allow alcohol? Oh, man. This heathen, I tell you. Their day of reckoning is coming. So, you can see where they're going with this. They've perverted almost the entire planet. They perverted their own country, their own people, and our people who migrate to these countries. And the sole purpose is to entrap your soul. And it's been so normalized that we don't even know it. And again, this is not an attack on women, you guys. This is what I've read, and I've combined it with my life experience, and I've combined it with current affairs as to what's going on in the world, and the scriptures and wisdom, and I've come to the conclusion of what I've just explained in this video. And I'll close off with this. What's going to come about because of all this? Jesus Christ, on his way to Golgotha, carrying the cross, was surrounded by women who were crying and weeping, just like Eve was when she realized her folly. And they were crying uncontrollably. Now, if you listen to what he says here, women, don't weep for me, but rather your children. Now, the first thing I thought was, well, why would he say that? What a thing to say out of the blue. Because, you know, you would think, oh, they're crying for him because of what's happening to him. Well, he said that because he knew what was coming. Because they had allowed this to happen. The women influenced the decision to crucify Jesus Christ, you guys. Once you give them this political power, this freedom, this, you're going to be a defense minister, a CEO. That's why Satan wants them in these positions. That's why Satan allows this. Women's liberation was a satanic movement from the start. I'm not saying that we shouldn't, give women their rights or something like this. But to let them run recklessly wild and do whatever they want and lecture men. Remember what the Bible says. Because of their oppressors, my people are ruled by women. It's a mockery to God, you guys. It's unnatural. The oppressor knows this. And that's why he does it. He does it to mock you, and he does it to mock Jesus Christ. But Jesus Christ says to them, "Do not weep for me, but rather your children." And that is because he knows, because of what they've allowed to happen and what they've assisted in or took part in, they will pay for, and they will watch their children die. There's another analogy, by the way. When we look at the book of Revelations and the beast from the bottomless pit, the whore that is riding on the beast is drunk with the blood of the saints. Hear what it says. And when the beast rises up from the pit, the beast will kill the whore. Now you stop and you think and say, wait a minute. I thought they were on the same team. I thought, the beast, Satan, hates the saints of God. And she was drunk with the blood of the saints. Why would he kill her? It's because Satan hates women, you guys. You see? You see the irony of it? You see how genius it is? This guy has women thinking that he's all for them when he actually hates their guts. He hates them more than anything. Because it is them who caused him from the beginning to fall from his heavenly place. You see? In his hypocrisy. He lusted after them. He taught them to put on the makeup and then committed fornication with them, wanting them to deceive men, but he himself was deceived. Produced giants and evil spirits with them, and thus was cast into hell. He hates them because of this. So when the whore or the harlots help him achieve his goals, he will then say, step aside, I'm taking over from here. Because you see, he has no power over God and over men who God dwells within. And therefore, he resorts to women to help him achieve his goals into making these men fall spiritually. And once that is achieved, he will then kill them because he hates them. And that women's rights, or whatever they want to call it, liberation, will be thrown right out the window, and he'll take off his mask and show them what it's all really about. The prophet Daniel confirms this. He says once Antichrist sets up his throne, he shall have no regard for the desire of women. So we can see here that just like Eve, just like the women in Jerusalem, today's women are being totally deceived. And it's so bad that they're ingraining their young daughters to be like this. To put the paint on their faces, to wear the attire of a harlot. This is totally normal. And the patriarchs tell us that in order to combat this, you must teach your daughters from a very young age. You must ingrain them with godly values and the fear of the Lord, or they're doomed. An adulterous woman has blood on her hands. And the reason I also named it, or the reason I gave it the subtitle, No Substance, is because once women get in their older age, this makeup that they put on, I've realized it makes them age horribly. And without, disrespecting anyone, but that movie with Demi Moore is a perfect analogy of the message they're trying to get across. These things turn women into monsters. Unnatural-like beings. You weren't meant to age that fast, but this stuff makes you age incredibly fast and just changes your whole natural look. Fornication takes away your innocence, but a lot of these issues can be fixed with the fear of the Lord. Yeah, I guess that's about it. I've tried to make this video a few times, but I've missed so many points because I really wanted to hammer it home. This one small thing called makeup leads to this monstrous problem. And when you understand the root of it through the prophet Enoch, again, he says it was taught to women for the sole purpose of deceiving men. And women themselves are deceived by it. The patriarchs call it the poison. A poison. It runs so deep, you guys, that we have to understand a problem or identify a problem immediately and eradicate it when it rises up. There's an old saying that if you want a good garden, you got to eliminate the weeds. And there's another saying, a little leaven ruins the whole lump. So that's all it takes, is just one little thing, which leads to another, and another. And then it's like, the AIDS virus. Once it attacks one cell, then that cell multiplies and attacks other cells. It's unstoppable. I think that's the AIDS virus and how it works anyway. I'm not a scientist. But still, this was meant solely for edification. Mine as well. Okay? Anyhow, until next time.